Bengals wide receiver coach Troy Walters. We'll talk about this and more coming up next on the Wincinnati podcast.
It's an exciting time to be a Bengals fan.
Welcome to the Wincinnati podcast. I'm Ace. He's Zim. Zim, how you doing today, bro?
Doing pretty damn good, man. We've had some crazy stuff kind of happen, a little, well, not crazy, but interesting day, right? So
It has been an interesting day today for sure.
right, did that, talk AFC North, talk Myles Garrett and all that other stuff. So coming back to this world, like, here we are. Let's go.
No, here we are. Well, guys, just so you know, we have a special guest today. We got Bengals wide receiver coach Troy Walters, fresh off of the Pro Bowl, stopping by today. We'll get into that. Obviously, we got to talk about the Trey Hendrickson situation as well. We'll talk about that later in the show. And then we have some draft stuff as well coming up as well. But as we have said, we have a special guest, and we're now going to bring in wide receivers coach Troy Walters. Troy, welcome to the Wincinnati podcast, bro.
Man, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to come on.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Now, you're coming off of just being at the Pro Bowl with the wide receivers down there. Uno was down there. What was the experience like at the Pro Bowl working with some of the best in the NFL?
Tremendous blessing to be picked by Peyton Manning to go down there and be a part of the best of the best. I was able to bring my family, so that's important. I had 4 kids; they had a great time. But just be able to interact with the top players in the league, to get to know them, to connect with them on a different level, was truly special. And a lot of times when I was down there, I just told them, what I thought of each guy and how much respect I had for the DBs on both sides that we went up against and the other receivers. And so it was just a great time, just hanging out, and a great time hanging out with Jamar and Joe and Trey and you never take those opportunities for granted. So tremendous blessing, and myself and my kids, my family, wife had a great time.
The last time that we did talk to you, it's been a little bit of time. You talked to us. I remember you saying about T and how blessed he was to be in that, even going into a franchise tag at that time period. Just talking about like how that's gonna change his life. Did you have anything that you told like Trey Hendrickson or Jamar in regards to like a possible extension or whatever they got going on financially moving forward?
I really didn't. They're smart guys. They have so many people involved in their lives, agents, close friends, family. So I try to stay out of the financial decisions. They all, to a T, they all love Cincinnati. They all want to be a part of the Bengals. They love the culture. They love Zach. They love putting on the orange, the black, the white, the stripes. And so, they want to play here. And as you know, the NFL is a business, and both sides have to come to agreement. And so my hope, my prayer is that, Trey's able to come to agreement, Jamar and T, and we keep everyone together and go out there and win a Super Bowl.
For sure. One of the friends of the show, Andre Iosivas, talk about his emergence last year with him stepping into that third wide receiver role for you guys last year.
It was awesome. Very proud of him. Ever since he got here, he's gotten better and better each year. We drafted him in the 6th round, more of a project. Thought it might take 2 or 3 years to get him up to speed with the level of competition. But since day one, he's been a tremendous worker, works his tail off, first one out, last one to leave. He's diligent. He wants to be great. And so he showed up last spring. After his rookie year, he understood what he needed to prove upon and showed up last spring and had a great spring. Showed up summer training camp, had a great training camp. And then he had a great season. I know the numbers may be deceiving. Well, he only had 35 or whatever so catches, and the yards may not look like a great season, but you got to understand that he was, really in the pecking order. You got Jamar, you got T, you got Chase Brown, Gesicki. And so, he was the fourth target. But when his number was called, you saw him, he made plays. And so I expect him to make another jump. He trains hard in the offseason. Yep. I expect him to take another jump and be a formidable player on this team.
One of my worries is that in a world that I try not to go to is that we're moving forward without Tee Higgins, right? And then we're struggling to find someone of that caliber, because I have a high level of respect. I feel like a lot of people do not understand how good Tee Higgins is and his value. I've heard different comments talking about the offense with the two top dogs at the wide receiver position. Do you think that that's something simple that the Bengals can transform into if they had to move forward without Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase is there, and then you have Yoshi there? Is that something that they're capable of doing?
Well, first of all, T is a special player. I'm so proud of him. We came in together in 2020. And so I've seen him grow not only on the field, but also off the field as a man. And I'm excited for him, the opportunity, the situation that he's in. I hope and pray that he re-signs and I'm able to coach him 4 or 5 more years. He's able to, team with Jamar and Joe and have a great career. People love him in the city, the T chance and everything. So, and he understands that. And I think, if you ask him, he wants to stay. He wants to do everything he can to be with those guys. But again, it's a business. And like the NFL, with anybody, if things happen and you're able to keep guys and sometimes you lose guys. And when you lose guys, you have to move on. And we'll have to find a way if that happens, which I hope it doesn't. But if that happens, then we'll have to address the receiver position, free agency, in the draft. I don't know if there's a Tee Higgins caliber player out there, but it's my job, whoever we select, to develop and get them up to speed and have them play at a high level. You look at Kansas City, who's their superstar receiver, and so I think you can win a Super Bowl, as a team and not necessarily having, high profile guys. I think Joe Burrow's good enough to win a Super Bowl without T, but we obviously would want T, but the show goes on and we got to prepare and make do and coach the guys up and play. But I'm hoping that, T re-signs and I'm able to coach him for another 4 or 5 years.
A lot of people talk about the way of building a roster. And I think something that's interesting is you play with Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, right? A franchise that really put an emphasis on keeping those two guys around, on building around offense with Peyton, those guys over there, you guys on offense. And then on defense, they kind of went in, got their kind of Trey Hendrickson in terms of Dwight Freeney, right? And Mathis and stuff like that. Do you feel like the Bengals can do something similar? Obviously, we're not the GM, but we've seen teams like the Eagles do it. We've seen teams like the Dolphins do it. Do you think that the Bengals can try to do something similar to the Colts back in the day?
I think you can. Like, again, your philosophy, how you build a roster, you have to understand what it is. And, when you have a Joe Burrow, most of the time it's going to be really centered around the offense and giving him as many weapons as he needs. But at the same time, you got to have defense. You got to have guys on defense that can make plays and stop the team in crucial situations. And you got to balance that. And so it always helps to have a high power offense. If you score 30, 35 points, you should win. You should put yourself in position to win. And so, I know the front office, they'll balance that. We got to do a great job as coaches with our scouting, make sure that the guys we draft, we can't miss. We can't miss. And that's a crucial aspect of this whole thing is when we bring guys in, we got to know that they fit the culture and that they're going to, when they get on that field, they're going to produce. So, and when you got Joe Burrow, man, anything is possible. He makes other guys around him better. Similar with Peyton, Peyton played with Marv and Reggie and Wes and some great Demaryius Thomas, but he made other receivers better as well. He made myself better. He made the Brandon Stokley's a lot better. And so Joe's able to elevate the other guys around him, not only receivers, but running backs, tight ends. And with him, you always have a chance.
I feel like that's my fear is that, the same way you're feeling about Joe Burrow, or you said that about Joe Burrow, that's how I feel about Jamar Chase is like, how can I amplify his production? And when people talk to, and they say what you just said, which was important that you just said that about, well, if you got Joe Burrow, you can still go and have highly productive seasons. And my argument would be against, or I guess it pertains more to Jamar Chase, is that if all of this attention is on Jamar Chase now without a prototypical wide receiver too, how does that affect the offense?
Yeah, you definitely want to have, the more weapons you have out there, the better, and teams this year, teams doubled Jamar and did everything they could to take him out of the game. And as a staff, we were creative, moving around. It's always great to have a Tee Higgins, a true, another number one across from him that, if they do double Jamar, he can make a play. And so, if we do lose T, then we got to find another guy. I think Andre's going to take another step. But we got to add another guy, whether free agency, draft, that we feel like we can plug in and he can produce and take some of the tension off of Jamar. Or when the attention is to Jamar, he can make plays when his number's called. So that's where we're in now, the evaluation process. And, whatever it comes down to, we'll make the right decisions and get ready for the season.
One of the exciting players that the Bengals drafted last year was Jermaine Burton. Obviously, he wasn't able to get on the season much his rookie season. What were your thoughts on his rookie year and where he can go in his sophomore season?
Yeah, disappointing, to be honest with you. But we knew the issues going in. We knew that there was some maturity that needed to take place. We felt like we had the room. We had the group of guys, the culture that could bring a guy in and help him mature and reach the potential. We're doing everything we can, but at the end of the day, he's got to want it more than we do for him. And I think this season was hard on him. He's used to playing. He's used to being the man. And this year he wasn't, and it was hard on him. And I kept telling him, like, you've got to be dependable. You got to be consistent, trustworthy. And so this was a tough season. Hopefully, he's learned from this season, because we haven't given up on him. He's still talented. He still has the ability you saw in a few times this past season. In Kansas City, running by Slay against Philly. Yeah. He's a vertical threat, and so we're doing all we can. We haven't given up on him, but in the end, it's going to come down to if he wants to be here, if he wants to put in the work, the time, become more consistent, become more disciplined, and if he does, then he'll be a great contributor in 2025.
There is a just quick question on Burton too. There's another, I don't know if this is hearsay or whatever. Was there a plan going into, I believe, the Chargers game or whatever, where he was going to have a bigger impact on that game? Had whatever happened, going into the game, stop them from playing or being a healthy scratch in that game? Was there an emphasis or was there a game plan to feature Jermaine Burton going into that game?
Yeah, there was a time when, we were down T and, early in the season, I think Kansas City, when T was down, Jermaine stepped up against Kansas City and had a big play, and then T came back. And so, when T and Jamar are out there, it's tough for anybody to get, reps and targets and all that. And then T went down later in the season before the Raiders game. And so whenever he went down, we got to build a game plan. We got to make sure other guys are ready. So we know what Jermaine could do. We knew the talent he was, and it comes down to discipline and making sure that Joe can count on you, the coaches can count on you, and so some things happen. I don't want to get into specifics, but I told him, man, once you don't take being in the league for granted. Once you take it for granted and you just feel like, well, I can just show up, then you're gonna be out the door. Man, every day is a blessing. You got to treat it like that. When your number's called, opportunities called, man, you got to seize it. And hopefully he's learned that this year, last year, and we see a changed Jermaine Burton.
For sure, man. Before we let you get out of here, saw this tweet on Twitter, man. You said that there was a common denominator to Reggie Wayne with some of the guys on this list, man. What was the common denominator?
Yeah. So for number one, I played with both of those guys. With Jerry Rice, and I'm not going to brag, but I used to train with Jerry Rice out in Palo Alto during the off season. In fact, when I was in college, a lot of the pro guys would come out the infamous hill out in the Bay Area. I used to train with Jerry Rice and run that hill with him. Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan, I was with those guys. Obviously, Jamar T, Marvin, Reggie. That's why I tell guys that I was always the fourth and fifth receiver, because I was behind some Hall of Fame guys, but really learned a lot from those guys. And it's really who I've become as a coach, just taking my experiences as a player around the best of the best, how they prepare day in and day out, the little nuances of route running. That's what I try to bring to the table. I try to be a resource to the guys, and I'm proud to see, man, Jamar and T above Marv and Reggie. That's saying a lot, and they still got still have room to improve, and so I'm excited about Jamar and the things that we talked about, all the things that he can still improve on. Yeah, had the record season, but he can get better, and then T can still get better, and so proud of those guys, and it's a special list right there.
Where do you think they stack up on the list personally with those dudes?
I think you got to end their career. Those guys played, and I think once their careers are over, I truly believe they're going to be up there. But right now, let them finish their career. Let them.
There you go, Coach. Don't hype them up yet.
No. They know that. They know I'm not going to hype them up too much, but just to be mentioned in that list is special. And the thing about those guys is, and Jamar, they're not going to let this season. T's not going to let the contract, whatever he gets, slow him down or become complacent. They want more. They're hungry. They're coachable, and so they're only going to get better and better. And I'm blessed to be a part of their lives and to coach them, and happy for all the success that they've had.
Yeah, before you go, I just want to ask this. Appreciate your time too, because I know you're not feeling 100%. Throughout the season, I was really critical a lot. I pissed a lot of people off online because I was telling them like the offense didn't come through in a lot of different spots, and I know that the defense took a brunt of the blame.
Yep.
Is that something that you all had talked about, or is that something that you all are like focusing on moving forward this year? I thought that there were a lot of opportunities that the Bengals offense could have closed out some of those games.
I agree. Yeah, the defense got a lot of the slack, but in each of the games that we lost, there were times the defense did enough for us to win that game. And there were times where, we didn't convert on a first down. If we convert against Kansas City on a first down, the game's over. They don't get the ball back. I can go through Baltimore the first time. We drive down. If we can get another first down, we can probably run the ball and the game's over. The defense got the ball back in overtime. We didn't do anything with it. Both Baltimores, we're up second game against Baltimore. So every game we lost, offense had a chance. That's what I told the receivers. I said, you can point fingers and all that, defense, this and that. But if you look at the games, we had a chance. We had if we make a catch, if we get the first down, the game's over. And so we definitely, as a staff, are going to look into that, and the players understand that we've got to be clutch. That's why Kansas City is where they are, because they make those plays. They get in those situations. You keep them in the game. Patrick Mahomes is going to make that play. They're going to find the catch. They're going to, and on offense, you got to be able to capitalize on every opportunity in this league, and especially against Kansas City, which teams have not done. So it's definitely on us. We're not going to point fingers at the defense. We're good enough to whatever they do. We should be able to score one more point.
Well, Coach, we once again appreciate you stopping by, man. Appreciate your insight. We love having you as the wide receiver coach, so we appreciate what you do for the Bengals. So thank you once again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And anytime you want me on, it'll be my pleasure to come on.
Yes, sir. Who they coach?
Guys. Appreciate y'all.
Go win that Super Bowl.
Yes, sir.
Let's get it.
Yes, sir. Coach Troy Walters, wide receiver coach, legend, man, for real. Played with some legends, has done some great stuff. I know when we were at the Super Bowl, we saw him in the line with the receivers, getting them routes in with them, man. So he's one of a kind.
I was watching one of them videos the other day, and I was just like, man, I wanted to have one of them corny tweets where you put it out online. You'd be like, man, take me back. But I know that.
Oh, the Super Bowl video?
Yeah, bro. Like, that was watching the wide receivers warm up, and like that surreal moment of like watching it. You remember when we were like standing right there, and I was like, bro, we're really here. Like, that was, I don't know. I hate to be that guy. I know somebody will be like, bro, that was 4 years ago. But bro, that's one of them things that like you just do not forget. You also don't forget what happened at the end where they screwed us. But
oh, you talking about which one? Which one? Oh,
all of it. But
yeah, man, great having him on.
He's nice, like bro. He's the real deal. And I know he wasn't feeling that great. I wanted to ask him about like I would like to ask him about like what does he want to do like coaching wise outside of being a wide receiver coach? Like, what does that look like, and how come?
Because I felt like I was talking to a head coach, bro. I didn't feel like, you know what I mean? I'm getting head coach vibes. So
pay attention. Pay attention. He didn't run away from any of them questions either.
Nah, he did not.
I feel like we were very specific on, hey, look, Burton, hey, look, T, like Jamar, like getting double. Like, he didn't shy away from any of those things. And I think like a real good coach, you know, does that. I think they meet everything head on. And I think that's why I asked him that final question about like, hey, how do you feel about like closing out those games or whatever? Because to me, my argument is always going to be this. You get a better defense, score 17-14 instead of 32-29. It's the same circumstance. And he talked about carpe diem and seizing the moment. That's how I look at football. Like, it could be 32-30. It could be 17-14. It's still
that's real. Because when we've talked offline, that's always been your point. Like, I've always been like, but Zen, what about the defense at the end of the game and this and that? And you've been like, but we had a drive where if we convert or if we don't fumble or if just like you, it sounded like he was you. I was like, am I talking to Zen? And I thought that was dope. To have that accountability.
Anybody that's ever played sports, I think that's how I think fandom versus actually being in, you know, and I only played all the way to high school, so I ain't saying I've been in the NFL. Yeah. But to me, that's how like anybody looks at it. It's like, yeah, I could, as analysts and what we do, you're not incorrect to look at the defense in its totality. And I think that, but totality doesn't go week to week for me. And I think that that's where a lot of our fans, or not even our fans, just people in general, be like, well, the Bengals defense was so terrible. I'm like, yeah, it was. But like he said, you know, it gave him some shots.
Nah, they definitely gave him some shots for sure in the games. Man, outside of that, we got to talk about the big news today. Trey Hendrickson. It made headlines because we don't really get to, like, I'm going to be real. I can't remember the last Trey Hendrickson interview that I've ever heard. Like, Trey Hendrickson isn't a guy that does interviews like that, right? Like, he's not someone that sits down with local media, Cincinnati media or whatever, and really does interviews like that. He's kind of like a unicorn when it comes to that situation. The last time I can remember someone kind of similar to this was kind of Geno Atkins, right? Like the all-pro that you never, like, the only time you're seeing Geno Atkins for an interview for real. And I'm not saying that that's the only interviews Trey does, but the last time I remember a Geno interview, it was like an extension. It was like you don't really hear from him like that. That's not to say that he runs from interviews, because I think Geno actually ran from a reporter back in the day. But seeing him on the Pat McAfee show, like saying exactly how he feels a week later when we get the Duke Tobin sound bites, like, what were your thoughts when you watched it? Because I know everybody was like, bro, this is Trey Hendrickson. And it wasn't on a Zoom. Bro pulled up to the Pat McAfee show on the couch.
Yeah. And
like really just let people know how he felt. And I felt that he did it in a respectful manner. I felt that he was respectful to the fans. I felt like he was like, it wasn't on some, you couldn't see that and be like, this guy's an a-hole. You couldn't see it and be like, man, Trey Hendrickson is selfish. Like, bro literally went on there and was like, I want the Cincinnati Bengals to win a Super Bowl, whether that's with me or if they're trading me or without me. Like, I want them to win a Super Bowl no matter what. What were your thoughts like when you saw Trey on that segment basically responding to the comments of what Duke Tobin said and kind of freely talking about his situation? Because we didn't see this last year.
I think that the players have talked about this. When I first saw him, I think that Joe Burrow and company and maybe Trey Hendrickson's agent said, we're going to talk this offseason. The last offseason, there's so many of our fans that don't understand or appreciate from a player's perspective how Trey Hendrickson just went out there, banged up, messed up hand, and just played after he requested for a trade. There's a lot of people that would have set out. Jamar did the same thing before the season. There, you know, Ayuk and all that, he wasn't even coming to none of that stuff. And Lamb was going through the same thing too. Jamar was, so all the players, I feel like this all season was like, yeah, enough is enough. And I'm a person, I feel like I work better under pressure, and I like the pressure. I think a lot of people that are scared of the confrontation, or like the meeting up of it or whatever, like, or just meeting it head on, I just don't think that they appreciate it. But for me, I just feel like it's calculated, and I feel like it's the pressure that the front office needs. And I think most people, most of our fans would say they don't like the front office. They don't like that. And then I saw some of them scoff at the idea, like the players like Joe Burrow, like speaking out on it. And then now they're like, oh no, man, like this could be bad. I'm like, no, this is what has to happen. For every change, revolution, or whatever is going to happen in the history of this country, this is what happens. The only other thing that you could do outside of this is violence, and we don't want violence. We want communication, and I thought Trey was very upfront about, hey, I want communication through this. I don't want to learn through my father through a text message. He said that. He also said, yeah, if I have to be traded, I hope that they get enough returns to go win a Super Bowl. And I respect him for saying that, because I think a lot of people like myself, haven't thought about the life of, what does this look like without Tee Higgins or Trey Hendrickson? But when he said that, it did start to make me be like, what could be the return? And our good friend of the show, who actually is on Bengals Pulse, Mon, I would love to talk to Mon about this, because he scoffed at.
Hold on, you went out.
My bad. He scoffed at the idea. He was like, how could you have a bad defense and then, Trey Hendrickson get traded? But I was like, hold on now. What's the return look like? And I know that a lot of people probably don't want to hear that, but I would love to hear, like, what does that look like? Because if he is 30, almost 31 or whatever, I don't really buy into him falling off a cliff, but I do buy into, like, what my philosophy is more like 2-year windows. And I don't know if they could pull off the extension, and I hope that they can. But if they don't, I think that you could figure out a way to go and rotate a really, really good lineup on the trenches. That was my takeaway, I guess, from that conversation. Did you have a different takeaway that was like outside of, like, I immediately just started talking about or thinking about, like, what if they did have to trade him?
I mean, Luka Doncic just got traded this week. I mean, 25-year-old all-star in his prime. So I would never say never. I think just given the circumstances, right, I just struggle to wrap my head around it because of what we currently have, like the dire need at the position as it stands now with Trey Hendrickson, right? So the takeaway that I had is the Bengals realistically could be looking at life without Trey Hendrickson. I think the emphasis has been on Tee Higgins, whether or not he's going to be here, right? But I think, like, lurking in the shadow, it's like Trey Hendrickson really might not be there. And this, to me, is starting to get into weird territory, because this is something that we've seen from the Bengals before. The communication, the gaps in communication is something that really needs to be fixed, because we're hearing Andrew Whitworth talk about stuff from 2016, and it's like players in 2025 are still saying similar things. And it's like, if a deal gets done or not, that's not really the big emphasis. Sometimes it's about how things are handled, right? Like communicating and being on the same page with your players. Even if it's, hey, Trey, we don't know if we have enough to pay you. We don't need to see that on a headline. You can shoot his agent a text or something, like give him the heads up. So, like, if Trey Hendrickson is somewhere, let's say Trey Hendrickson was at the Super Bowl this week, how does he even answer something like that when he's getting caught off guard because Duke Tobin was interviewed last week at a random kind of situation? Had they had that conversation offline and been on the same page, we wouldn't be sitting here now with, okay, is Trey Hendrickson asking to get traded? Like, they had to actually have his agent on to clarify to a local station in Cincinnati, like, is Trey asking to get out of here? And his agent was like, no, the goal is to stay in Cincinnati. But because there's that gap in communication from the front office, These are the headlines that we're dealing with from Pro Football Talk and all of this, where it's like they can spin it now. Bengals don't want to pay Trey Hendrickson. Bengals don't. Duke Tobin doesn't see Trey Hendrickson in the Bengals' future. And it's like, if I'm Trey Hendrickson and I'm getting a text from my dad with a Pro Football Talk link, and it's like the Bengals don't want me, that's where some of these issues arise when it's all said and done. So I think as it stands, bro, and it looks like Jimmy Butler was just traded to
the Warriors.
Like basketball, the NBA.
What?
But it just doesn't leave a good feeling for players that are here. We heard Jamar Chase say similar things. They communicated this, but it wasn't that. Like Tee Higgins, there's been no communication from the Bengals then. Like, so communication, whether it's good or bad, just being real and transparent with the players, I think goes a long way. And that's something that the Bengals can change to make some of these situations not go as sour as they have been. And I think that that's just where I'm at with it, is we just can't do things to make situations that could potentially go bad even worse by just not communicating to somebody. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're a boss. Are you not communicating with your workers when you got to communicate with people? Like, even when it comes to your coworkers and stuff like that, if you guys had issues, if there's something that you depend on somebody to get done, you got to communicate it. And a lot of the times in my line of work, when things aren't communicated, it makes things 10 times worse. And it's like, bro, if you would have just told me that from the get-go, I might not like it, but at the end of the day, I can respect you and I can be like, all right, cool. This isn't me getting blindsided by something.
Right. I think if they had transparency from the front office and said, hey, look, this is what's really going. I think the transparency, though, also would alienate a whole lot of people, and it would make a lot of people disgusted with the whole front office to begin with, because I think the real issue is a cash flow problem. And I think if they were up front and told people that, I think everybody would
tell players that, or are you talking about telling us? Because I'm just saying tell the player, so the player don't have to tell
the player, tell anybody. I think it would get out. And I think at that point, like say they told Trey or whatever, you think he might tell like someone in his family, and then his family going to talk to somebody like me, and they go, you know what I'm saying? And then I'm going to talk to somebody in my household. Like, I'm not going to spread out though, whatever. But you know how this goes, bro. And I just think that everybody wants transparency. I think what they would see from the front office, I don't think you would like it. I think you would look at them and say they mismanage money and they're not really good at running a business. And I think that that's a real issue why everybody's like, why don't they talk and why don't they do that? Because I think that after a while, it would come out that they don't really have the cash flow. And because there's no reason when you look at this stuff and you look at the amount of money that they're spending, and mind you, this is the norm for 4 or 5 players to make 20 plus million on any roster, roster in football. You could go find the worst. The Bengals fans are sitting here talking about keeping one or the other. Like this wouldn't even be a thing for any team. There's no team. Like, even you could criticize the Jaguars all you want, but they're big spenders in free agency. Like, they spend cash. So, like, it's just a cash flow thing. And I think that that's the real issue, because most teams would have had a Miles Murphy, a first-round pick, emerge, and they would have had to pay him. Most teams would have had a Cantella Britt second-round cornerback that balled out, and they would have had to pay him. The Bengals don't got none of that. They got the defensive player of the year and Jamar Chase, a triple crown winner or whatever, sitting there right in their face and saying, yeah, we want to play for y'all forever. And we're like delayed, and we ain't got to, like, this should be a no-brainer. Like, this should be done.
Let me play devil's advocate.
That gotta be the thing. It's gotta be cash, bro.
Let me play the devil's advocate. Okay, if it is the cash, I feel like people know that, right? But I know my wife, who's not into sports, she took a class during her MBA, and it was like a lot of professional sports. And one of the things that they talked about was the constraints of a small market team in professional sports, how you can't afford certain players and stuff like that. If it was transparent and it's like, we just can't afford this, do you think that they would get a pass, or do you think people would still be like, Mike Brown's got money, he can make it happen? They're just being
pitchforks. Everybody would say, y'all need to sell the team then. Everybody would say that. It would make it worse. Like that's why my theory is that's why they don't come out and talk, because if they talk too much, then I think that will come out. And then I think everybody will look at them and be like, oh, y'all just got handed the team and y'all mismanaged the whole thing. Everybody would say you need to sell the team, or you need to let us, the fans and the public, take over the team. That's what I firmly believe, because there's no reason, if you go look at this and you look at the cap space that they got and you look at the cash spent that they got, they're at the bottom of the league every single year. Now, mind you, I looked at this earlier. Shout out to Joe Goodberry. He posted this, and I've looked at this prior, and I've talked about it on the show before. They've only cash spent, like on an annual basis, salary wise, it's only 11, 12 million. It's only 11, 12 million less than what the Chiefs did this past year. So you can look at that. They can say that. But the Chiefs have a very unique circumstance, because the Chiefs 2022 draft is godly. All of them are like they're crazy. So, and they got Pat Mahomes and they got the refs. So it's like very different. So like they could compare and say that, but along with it, there's so many teams that spend way more than and I went back and looked all of these years, bottom of the league as far as like cash spent. Now signing guys and getting like, you know, like the guys that are willing to take less cash and take their salary with the Bengals pay it out later. That's what signals to me that they don't have cash, is because they're willing to take on all these contracts where guys get paid weekly after the Bengals get paid on a weekly basis. You know what I'm saying? Like if you got cash, you just be like, like let it go, like go get this guy. But it's crazy that all their contracts that they do, there are a whole bunch of guys that are willing to take that money on the back end, where y'all know free agency and signing big time requires that you spend the money up front.
Yeah, they gotta spend the money up front, man. I mean, I don't know. You can't extend Trey Hendrickson on credit. You can't put T on your Discover card. Like that's just, you can't put T Higgins on layaway and be like, yeah, we're gonna come and scoop you another year. Like that's
a great analogy. That's what they're trying to do. There are different things that they could use, like void years and different things like that they're like scared. Why would you be scared to use void years and like later hits? That would be like if you had unsureness, but like, bro, it's Jamar Chase, it's Tee Higgins. Like these are young talents. And Trey Hendrickson, he could slow down, but bro, he just came off of 35 sacks in 2 years. Like you think he about to just fall off? Bro, done played through everything. They're like no-brainer decisions. And like you just described it very well. Like you can't put these dudes on credit like that. I appreciate the pressure. Like, I know a lot of people don't like them or Joe Burrow speaking out on this stuff. I like it. I think the only way that we'll get the change that we're looking for is that, like, me and you, I feel like we're identified as super fans. They try to do that weird stuff, like we don't interview people every damn week or whatever, but they try to classify as that because we like to look at both perspectives in this. Yeah. I'm pro player, but above all, I'm pro Bengals win. Like I'm pro Bengals. Like I don't know why that's like some weird myth that gets out on the internet. Is like we're like some crazy super fans because we actually get, you know, interviews, I guess, with people or something like that, or, you know, Troy Walters or something like. I don't know where that comes from, because people will hear me say, I hope that the Bengals get the best end of this deal and then knock this deal out. But when it comes to those stars, it's you gotta pay, bro. Like you got, like I want the Bengals to put on a masterclass in free agency and lowball the hell out of all of those unknown people. But the stars, you got to pay. Like it's we done talking. It ain't nothing else to talk about. Like where the cash at?
Putting the analyst hat on, man. It's just looking at this roster, guys that have to be going, decisions that have to be made. Like Coach Walter said, bro, like they can't miss in this draft. They can't miss in the draft. They can't miss in free agency. They can't miss in renegotiations. Like they have to have a plan going into this offseason, because there are just different positions that need to be addressed. If you don't keep Trey, what does that do to the edge room? If you don't keep T, what does that do to the wide receiver room? What does that do for your strategy and free agency? What does that do for your draft? Like, and I get it. Like you can't miss, but even in some of the biggest Bengals drafts, they have missed on some of these players, and to expect them to hit on 80%, let's just say 80, not 100%, because they're not hitting on all of them, but even like 70 to 60%, that's a tall order, bro, for anybody to kind of hit on the draft. You kind of brought up the 2024 draft class, right? You talk about Amarius Mims, Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson, Cedric Johnson, but then you still have some question marks with Jermaine Burton. Tanner McLaughlin didn't get on the field at all. Dejon Anthony, he had the issue with the Kansas City game, but we still don't know what we have for them. And that's pretty damn good. But still with Chris Jenkins, you're still looking at this season like if a D tackle was there in the first round, I'm not so sure that Chris Jenkins is a guy that's making me not take a Walter Nolan in the first round, right? So as it stands right there, we'll have to see what they do. But you kind of talked a little bit about the Trey Hendrickson trade scenario. Did you want to expand upon that, or was that something that you wanted to?
We could push that for another show, but I did want to say this: the difference, because I know there's somebody probably be like, "Well, why you think that T can't get traded?" One, Joe Burrow has been very adamant about this is the guy that I need, right? And I think that the most narcissistic, arrogant thing that you could do to me online is tell me what Joe Burrow needs when he's the guy that had to take 1,000 hits for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's the guy that has to take those snaps. He's the guy that tore his ACL. He's the guy that knows exactly what he wants and what's going to help him do his job. We're just on the couch watching all of this unfold. Yeah. So for all these people to be like, well, not all these people, it's a very small, finite bunch of people that say, well, this is what they should do. And da-da-da. But Joe Burrow told you what he wanted, and he don't ask for much. I feel like it's a very dangerous process to go and come up and construct different ways on how to not appease Joe Burrow, who is the franchise. And the star power that Joe Burrow has, and tomorrow will be on display because he's going to be on several shows, and he will talk.
That's going to be, get your sound clips ready.
Get your clips ready. The power that he has, this franchise has never seen. And if you piss him off, you had that tweet that said, don't piss Joe Burrow off. And people took it, they didn't know what you were talking about, but Bengals fans knew what we were talking about. You pissed Joe Burrow off, like that's a catastrophic thing to me. But the difference is this too. In a weak wide receiver draft class, in a weak free agent market, like even I like Chris Godwin a lot, right? Mm-hmm. What is it? What is he like? $6-8 million cheaper than Tee Higgins? Why would I go and outsource somebody that's never been in my system just to say $6-8 million? You see what I'm saying? Like that doesn't make sense. So all right, so life after T. Say you trade and you tag and trade T, which I introduced to a lot of people. I'm not saying I introduced the concept, but last year. And people thought I was crazy. Now that's like a take.
That's what everybody is kind of saying.
Now everybody's running with it. Like I didn't say that last year, and y'all all called me crazy for saying it because now his value is high, and now he's the number one free agent in all of football. It's a unicorn situation. The Bengals haven't had a guy at this level that was trade, capable since Dan Wilkerson. That's why I keep on referencing that. Even when they tag AJ Green, he wouldn't have yielded a first round or second round pick. He probably would have got a third because he was older. Jesse Bates is not the same conversation. We're talking about $13 million a year, $15 million a year safety versus a $30 million number one wide receiver. They are not the same. L'Jarius Sneed just did a tag and trade last season, and he got a third round pick, and he was probably the number one cornerback that would have hit free agency had he hit free agency. They are not the same. So people keep on talking about these examples of Bengals players that have walked. Nobody has walked that has been on a level of Tee Higgins level. None of them.
Right.
Statistically, like whatever metric you want to use, he's the number one thing. But the thing is, if you were to trade him and you got a late first round pick, say you trade him to the Commanders for the 29th pick, the operation that you would have to do to fix it, that's why I was asking Troy Walters those questions. It's like, how would you supplement that, right? Right. Because say you get another wide receiver in the draft. He could be really good. Say he's not. What's your contingency plan for that? To me, it would be going to go get another tight end in free agency. Maybe you do a Kyle Pitts deal, right? Maybe you do something like to go get you a real tight end and draft another tight end and get a running back. Why? Because it's not a sure thing. And if you're saying that you're in a Super Bowl contention, why would I leave that to chance? So I could draft another Jermaine Burton or somebody that has question marks or somebody that you're unsure about. People don't talk about all the wide receivers that the Bengals that drafted that didn't pan out. So, like, say you did that. Now you've wasted a whole nother year. And the whole thing to me is such a harder task to do than what people think. Because even if you go get cheaper labor at a wide receiver position, you still have to go get a tight end, another tight end, something like that to make sure. And now by the time you do that, you still spend 20-something million. So just sign T. Now, Trey Hendrickson is different to me because Trey Hendrickson, although I might not get 17.5 sacks, I might get better run support. I might get a younger version of him that maybe he doesn't pan out. Maybe he gives me 5-6 sacks. But his pick in conjunction with the 17th pick that I already have, now I'm adding another defensive lineman guy. And that's why I said when he said that, it did kind of raise my antennas. Now, if you're not talking about a first-round pick for Trey Hendrickson, hell no. We're talking about a defensive player of the year. But it is worth the conversation. I don't think you're changing around your defense. If you trade Tee Higgins in the tag and trade, I think you're changing your offense. I really do. That's why I asked Troy Walters, if y'all go back and watch the beginning of this interview, my questions were centered around what does that look like with Jamar Chase getting double teamed? What are you doing? Now, are we going 12 a lot more? Like, you got to think that takes time. You don't just go from
it's tough to go 12 when you don't have Gesicki's not there, Eric All's not there. Like, it's a tough situation. And I think that was a great question for you to ask him, because if you're looking at life without T, that's a tougher kind of thing to kind of replace there. Like, you just don't replace the Tee Higgins.
Super chat. People talk about tagging and trading. This is from Fuzzy Balls. Shout out to Fuzzy Balls. Shout out to the Harry Ness game. People talk about tagging and trading T. T can block any trade. It is in T's best interest to block it and play out 2025 as an unrestricted free agent in 2026 and really bust the market. I disagree. I think that him playing on the tag is super risky. I wouldn't do it. I think that if he got a tag, he should then talk to his agent if he couldn't reach an extension with the Bengals and say, what's the team that's offering Bengals whatever, line them up for me. Is it the Commanders? Is it the Patriots? I just feel like, to me, playing on the tag 2 years, that's where I go pro player. That's not fair to T. That's not fair, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the Tee Higgins situation, like, everybody's just like, you could just draft somebody. I'm not trying to Brandon LaFell my situation. Like, you talk about what happened when the Bengals moved on from Marvin Jones. They failed to find somebody in John Ross that was a replacement. They went the cheap route. They signed Brandon LaFell. You know, you talk about when they lost TJ Houshmandzadeh, they signed Lavernius Coles. That was a disaster. Like, the Bengals, a lot of people, when I hear them talk about the Bengals in terms of even people outside of our fan base, it's like, oh, they're just great at drafting receivers. Like, we didn't have the John Ross situation. Like, there's some Cody Kors in there too, guys. Like, you're just not. And like Marvin Jones, you got to think about it. Marvin Jones was a 5th-round draft pick, right? The guy that they thought was actually going to replace and come in as the number 2 was Mohamed Sanu. Now, Mo Sanu was still good. He ended up being more of a 3 than a 2. He was a 2 later with the Atlanta Falcons, but Marvin Jones was a guy that they just really got lucky on. And sometimes you can have luck, but you cannot depend on luck when it comes to the Bengals in this draft and doing what they do. So to replace a guy like Tee Higgins I get it. Joe Burrow's amazing.
It's tough.
However, this guy has to know the offense. Like, this isn't Madden. The guy has to pick up the offense. The guy has to develop chemistry with Joe Burrow. Like, there's some situations, a lot of people are talking about Cooper Kupp. First of all, I feel like Cooper Kupp is a slot receiver. So
right.
I don't know if it's a 1-for-1 kind of thing there, but there's other nuances and circumstances that people have to understand when they get into that position. Because I even remember AJ Green talking about Marvin Jones, right? He was like, he did this Hobson article and he was like, bro, yeah, we just got Tyler Boyd and somebody else, but he was like, bro, Marvin and Mo were just getting the offense and it finally clicked. Like, I don't want to have to wait another 2-3 years for a new receiver to come in, learn the offense, and then be up to speed year 3. Like that's a waste of time. So those are things that people just have to consider outside of it. That doesn't mean that you can't go out there and draft a receiver and they not do well, but it's just a big situation where I feel like if Joe's your franchise guy, the last thing that you want to do is kind of piss him off. And we see this happen a lot. We see it happen around the league. We've seen it happen with Aaron Rodgers when they get rid of certain players. We've seen it happen with Tom Brady where he got pissed and left the Patriots because he's like, y'all aren't getting anybody. You're not keeping anybody from me here. And the last thing that the Bengals need to do, especially with everything on the line for the franchise, you talking about lease negotiations. The last thing that you need to do right now is piss Joe Burrow off and make him feel like, I don't know if Cincinnati is where I want to spend my career, because when I got here, they let Jesse Bates go. They let DJ Reader go. Now they're letting possibly Tee Higgins go, possibly Trey Hendrickson. Like he's told you himself, we should not be in the business of letting good players walk out the door.
Super chat from Bashir.
Yeah, Bashir, Chase Higgins and Kupp, cry more. Who they?
Cry more. Hey, look. Hey, hold on. Can I just tell you, like me and Bashir do be saying some. Hear me out real quick though. Check this out. They have cap space. They do have more cash than what they're leading off. And everybody gets the collective bargaining. Everybody gets $400 million like every single season off of just TV money, right? In a crazy scenario, Chase, Tee Higgins, and Kupp could play if Kupp were to take less money, right?
Oh my God, we doing this again?
But hold on. Listen, hear me out. Say that you did that, right? You literally, like, if you did this, I guarantee the Bengals will win a Super Bowl, for one. Two, if Kupp took like 10 million or so or less or something like that, I could see it like being like he already probably gonna play for like 12, 14 million or something like low, because that's the Rams are gonna pay some of the money. But if they did that, they would go into the draft. You wouldn't look at wide receiver. You wouldn't even really care about tight end. You really wouldn't care about running back. You would then go to the draft and only draft one guard, because you would get the guard in free agency. You would go get one guard. The whole draft would be defense. Who's with me?
Hey, as you guys know, this show is brought to you guys and powered by BETUS. Shout out to them for sponsoring the show. We appreciate them rocking with us this season. Also, we are sponsored by Midwest Best Barbecue. So we're going to go ahead and cue that up now.
Wings and them CTVs. Midwest Best is the place to be for queuing wings. Midwest Best is the place to be for queuing wings. It's the AC to the Zim, M to the B's. Uno wings, G-Funk wings, and them CTVs. Midwest Best is the place to be for queuing wings. Midwest Best is the place to be for queuing wings. Say what up to Jordan Battle. We be going to battle. Intercepting balls like CTB did on Seattle. Putting 6 up on AZ. Juice gang amazing. Make sure you come get these wings, cause Zimby stay blazing. And T be smooth as ice. Jamal making DBs fold. TV got big levels, and now you already know. It's so pretty for Uno wings. Cam got the new wings. We call them CTBs. Only at MBs. H to the Zim, M to the B's.
Midwest Best Barbecue, 669 Justice Court in Loveland, Ohio. Make sure you stop in there, especially for Super Bowl weekend. They got the packages going on. Make sure that you lock in with them. Get your Uno wings, gripper wings, barbecue, anything that you can think of. They have it at Midwest Best Barbecue. So stop in and let Tim and Nicole know that Ace and Zim sent you. 1,200 people rocking with us right now live. So we appreciate y'all for coming through. Wincinnati podcast is live every Monday and Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We didn't go live Monday this past week, but you can expect us to be there next Monday. So make sure that you guys tap in, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Make sure you leave us some comments. Been enjoying reading the comments lately, especially with some of the guests that we've been having on. So if you guys have any thoughts on Troy Walters, definitely be sure to leave that in the comment box. And make sure that you follow Zim at Zim Hude. At Zim_Hude on Instagram. Follow me at New Stripe City. Follow the Wincinnati Pod at Wincinnati Pod on Twitter.
I want to ask you before we go, just real quick, did you have any takeaways for anybody that missed it earlier? Because I know everybody is going to go back and rewatch this episode. what was your biggest takeaway, or did you take away anything from the Troy Walters interview that we just did? The endorsement of the Player Center, they want to play for Cincy, him talking about Burton. Did you have any takeaway from that?
Kind of took away that somebody in the receiver room might have blamed the defense because he was like, you can't blame the defense for some of these games. If we make some plays here, that could end up being something. So I thought that was interesting because I'm like, who else would he be talking to other than like a receiver? So I thought that was pretty dope. But I'm glad that he didn't dodge any questions. That was my biggest takeaway. We asked him before, like, hey, is there anything that we shouldn't say? Or he was like, nah. So the fact that he was willing to sit up here and talk about Jermaine Burton and all of those guys, I think was dope.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to do that. Make sure everybody you subscribe and watch it. If anything crazy happens, we are going to try to do an emergency episode for y'all. But I think right now we're cool. Tomorrow, Joe Burrow.
Tee Higgins gets tagged. You can catch us on the Wincinnati podcast live as soon as it's reported.
Yes,
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Wincinnati podcast.